Good morning, and thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm Jay Sheila Rajput from Toma Now. Toma Now stands for Tomorrow Matters Now. Toma Now is a green economy consultancy. We're based in Cape Town. We essentially help high impact businesses grow and have been doing this for over 8 years now. We do this across South Africa, parts of Africa, and we have a growing presence in Europe and in Asia as well. So this gives us a wonderful global perspective in being able to actually tackle some of the challenges that we're facing. Part of what we do is our work focuses on the development of the waste economy as well as on the circular economy. This places us in a unique position because we get an opportunity to work together with organizations that are part of developing and implementing policies, whether this is the Department of Fisheries, Forestries and the Environment. And we work together with organizations like the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa. So we have an opportunity to look at things from an industry perspective, to understand, as an example, when it comes to food packaging, how we can be able to minimize impacts, as well as to be able to look at reducing as a whole. We further also work together with producers. These are the ones who are actively producing packaging to be able to protect consumer goods. And this in turn puts us in quite a unique position. It allows us to be able to look at things from a holistic perspective and to be able to actually tackle things from that side. This is the key thing in my mind that's needed from a systems-based perspective, is to be able to understand where the different pieces are and where we need to be able to make key shifts going forward. When it comes to sustainable packaging, our view is simple. For packaging to be considered sustainable, you have to look at the entire value chain from a life cycle perspective. We can't afford to limit our thinking simply to the raw materials themselves. We need to actually consider the entire process beyond the input material itself. We need to actually look at what goes into the design, into the manufacturing process. We need to look at the raw materials that are being utilized. We need to look at the use phase that's with the consumers. And we actually need to look at the post-consumer phase. So we advocate in terms of a much more holistic approach when it comes to the development and the design of packaging and the use, and to look at things from a fit for purpose perspective. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm really looking forward to the panel and to the engagement that follows.
Thank you very much, Jay Shala. You truly have also given us a kickstart, I think, particularly looking at the ethical side of building a waste economy. So we look forward to engaging on that with you. Thank you. Mr. Gray, Stephen.
Thanks, Yvonne. You're one of the few people that calls me Mr. Gray. I think you keep thinking my dad is in the room.
I knew you would mentions. I was ready for them today.
Please call me Steve. So I, as I said yesterday, I run a small incubator, technology accelerator and innovation collaboration space called the Makerspace, and we train people how to use equipment and technology to bring their ideas to life. We're running a project that we've been doing for 2 years now around sustainability and specifically a project to train people to start businesses using innovative circular design techniques. We have something called the Innovative Waste Design Studio, where we teach people how to make products out of waste, how to transform waste into valuable products. And it's a massive challenge. So we're on the ground here trying to figure out solutions, sustainable solutions to this massive problem of waste, and specifically single-use plastic being one of the key, single-use packaging, whatever you want to call it, one of the key outputs of our society, consumer society. So yeah, we've got a lot of experience working with people and trying to come up with new products and ideas, and very aware of the scale of the problem. So I'm very keen to get into the panel and see what solutions we can come up with.
Maybe let's start with you there, Steve. What makes packaging sustainable with your experience, particularly with the hub that the incubator or hub that you've developed?
Yeah, well, I think the definition of sustainability, we need to get to the roots of that first. So if you think about scaling something to infinity, if you had to scale it and scale it and scale it, at what point would it break? So if you take the water cycle, of the Earth, you've got water evaporating, turning into clouds, condensing, raining down, and that continues. And you could scale it as much as you want; it never goes away. We never run out of water. When you take something like single-use packaging, you take a product that you're going to use once, consumer's going to use once, you wrap it in some packaging that's going to last for hundreds of years. You scale that to the thousands and millions, and that's where you hit the problem that we're seeing now with the natural environment suffering. And the problem is accelerating as our companies are getting better at delivering products, as we're getting increasing the economic activity and access to resources. People are buying more stuff. So what makes something sustainable is it needs to either disintegrate into nothing, or it needs to come back and be reused. And so that if you make 100 more, 1,000 more, 1,000,000 more, you don't end up with something falling out the back of a truck or in a dump site or in the ocean. So I think, the question of how we get there, though, that is the obviously the challenging one. I think what we have to understand is that the problem starts with this consumer culture that we've all become so accustomed to and grown up with. And so we kind of here, as talking about packaging, we can't take full responsibility for the problem. We can't solve the problem on our own, that's for sure. We can make packaging that can be composted, and we can come up with some clever ideas about new packaging and new materials. But we're operating in a slightly broken system where we all buy in, or society at large buys into the idea that we should just be able to walk down the street and buy something every day and just keep buying more and more stuff. And so, we have to also push back a little bit on that side. And then I think, concerted efforts about what is the actual cost that we're willing to pay. So if you had to offer consumers the option of saying, well, here's something packaged in a completely sustainable package, it's going to cost you twice as much. Are they interested in that or not? And if they're not, then the economics are not working in our favor. So I think the big challenge is trying to prioritize which is more important, the natural environment. Like Devin was saying, you said we're a long way away from where we want to be. So does that mean for the next 50 years, we're going to just, the natural environment, they'll just suck it up and just deal with it? The fact that we're just going to pollute the ocean and the rivers and or are we going to say, no, well, we need to draw a line, and so where the regulations come in, you want to see a little bit more teeth to bring actual change.
Yeah, I think you've raised quite critical points there, Steve, because you also are helping us hypnotize the fact that packaging is, or it should be, a very personal, home-based thing. And how do we make it personal? How do we make it home-based? You're right. Tightening regulation, forcing people to make it matter, through regulation and through policy. So thank you very much for raising that. I think let's go to Farishta, and then we'll go to Devin, and then Jayshala. Farishta, in this regard, just based on what Stephen has covered, yesterday in some of our panel discussions, we were speaking about building an ethical economy, but this was, of course, in a different context because of the subject matter. But in this regard, I think for me, an ethical economy, when that comes to sustainable packaging, should be about the health of our citizens, the health of our nation, making sure that we are not as impacted with climate change as we are. So my question to you thereof is, how can we make packaging more ethical, through our corporate sustainability initiatives?
Well, let me start with agreeing with Steve that, I agree with you that today packaging causes lots of problems, and that's undeniable. We cannot, not talking about that or put that aside, but the packaging secures food safety and availability on the other side. By 2050, the world's population is predicted to be 9.1 billion. which will require an increase of 70% food availability. And packaging helps keep food safe, nutritious, and available. And with 33% of food lost or wasted each year, high performance packaging plays a critical role in today's global food delivery system. However, I agree with you, and sustainable packaging can make a difference. And how we can do that, we need to rethinking food packaging from the ground up, replacing fossil-based material with plant-based materials, increasing renewable share of material, which you know, in carton packaging, on average, more than 70% of the package is paperboard. We intend to increase even more plant-based material to replace the fossil-based polymer with plant-based polymer to remove the aluminum and replace it with alternative, with sustainable alternative solution. And we are testing it in some market in portion size. And on the other hand, we need to work on more on recycling and end of life of the package. That's not like Jayshala said, that's not the only solution, but we need to think about circular economy. We don't need to consider the package as a waste, but as a potential a material to reuse it. And nowadays, you know that we have more than 170 recyclers worldwide, two a paper recycler in South Africa and one polyoleo recycler in South Africa, that they are using the used beverage cartons and turning it to other materials, and we have other investments in progress. In between the responsible sourcing, increasing share of renewable materials, and recycling, we have to work on our own operation to decrease the waste, the pollution that we are creating in our own operation. And we have this target to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 for our own operation, and with the ambition of net zero greenhouse gas emissions for the entire value chain in 2050. Okay. And also we are supporting our customers to improve their environmental footprint when it comes to water use, energy use, and of course food waste in their own plants. And on the other hand, we are working with our suppliers to make sure that they are working sustainably in transportation and other critical areas.
I don't want to, because that's a power packed. I've got so many questions now. As you say, a point I want to ask. So let's hold it there, because we still got about 45 minutes to go, and we're gonna need you for that. David, I must extend my apologies. I did not give you an opportunity to introduce EcoMed. I had a glass of champagne yesterday, so I think that's what made me maybe, forget somehow. But my apologies. Please, as you introduce your organization and yourself, may I then ask you to answer the following question. Has the pandemic influenced your approach as EcoMed to sustainable packaging design? But please, may I afford you the opportunity just to tell us more about your organization and yourself. The rest of the panelists, please be a bit patient. You all have power pack content, so I'm trying to get through everybody in this hour. David, over to you, and then we'll go to Devin and Jayshala. David?
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and no apologies needed, actually. It's a really difficult job you're doing. and congratulations on everything you're doing. I want to say thank you to the organizers for this opportunity to share ideas on what we are doing. My name is David Uwisi-Mensah, and I'm a co-founder of Equipment Solutions. And our company is actually into environmental consulting, especially in wastewater and waste management consultations, right? And we are also into environmental advocacy. So today, I'm actually very excited that as an environmental advocate and an educator, I could be in the midst of the packaging industry to discuss things about sustainable packaging. So from this point of view, we have this podcast that we normally have environmental conversations on emerging solutions to emerging environmental issues. So you can just always find out Green Living Chat podcast. It's available on all podcast platforms to listen to the conversations that we're having. So I'll come from that perspective of an environmental educator. What is happening in the packaging industry, and what could be the possible things that as an environmental educator and also from the environmental management, waste management consultant, we can say about how we see the packaging industry and what can they do possibly to help in packaging. So, I mean, it's very clear that a single-use idea is not helping. It's very, very clear that the idea of single use is not working, and it's very obvious. There is nothing wrong with any material, being it wood, being it paper, being it glass. There is nothing wrong with the materials, but the way that we're using them is the problem. And sometimes we just have excessive packaging. Another issue that we have is that the recycling idea is not working really well, because it really doesn't make economic sense. If you have a bottle and the lid of the bottle is made from a different material, the label is made from a different material, and the bottle itself is made from a different material, making the waste management system a very difficult thing. Sometimes we have the label, we all know the label of recycling. It's available on every packaging, but we don't know what to do with it. It's actually not recyclable. So this is the reality, and this, if we are trying to look for sustainability, these are the things that we have to look out for. So is it possible for the industry to get into sustainability? But the issue here is that what is actually sustainability? Because it's actually become a household name that everyone uses it for their individual benefits. A lot of companies have been sued for having sustainability on their websites, but they're actually not doing anything. So if you look at the actual meaning of sustainability, which is for us to be able to meet the needs of the present generation without interrupting the future generation from doing the same. So it's just limiting our footprint, because whatever we do, we're going to have a footprint. But the actual sense is how much footprint are we leaving for the next generation to be able to have the pleasure of the facilities that we have. So in my opinion, I think that the packaging industry, it is possible to attain sustainability, but we definitely need to find the balance between sustainability, satisfying the customers, looking deep into what is needed in the supply chain and not overdo, and our economic benefit. It is very serious because, of course, it needs us to sacrifice a lot of things because we cannot attain sustainability if we are not ready to sacrifice, because we are really used to a certain system that is very difficult for us to change right now. And how do we know that a material is sustainable? Everyone has talked about life cycle assessment, and it is very important that every industry needs to know the footprint of their materials they are using, right from the source through the process to the end of life. And it's very important. We cannot do that without research and development. So if the industries are not really looking into this, then it means that we are really not willing to get into this aspect and to save the planet. We definitely have to add value and to the products that we are doing, because if I take a biscuit, open it, and just throw the rubbish away, that is single use. If you haven't added value to the customer, for the customer to be able to find other uses of this packaging, then it's practically single use. So already the customer has bought the package, but add a certain value for him or her to use the package for something else. I heard of a company that is doing a similar thing for refugees. They sent them packed products, and they had to use the package to turn into chairs and tables to be used in their refugee camp. And that was very wise example. And for sure, this can help for upcycling and downcycling as well. Education is super, super important. And I really have to stress on this, that we cannot do without education. People are so glued to the way of life, our high consumption rates now, that if we don't educate ourselves, clients, customers, and even ourselves in the packaging industry, it is not possible to move on. And one important thing also, which is my last point, is we have to design packaging systems that are localized. Every country, every region, every town has different products that they consume, though we have generalized things that everyone needs, but the designs and the concepts really needs to be localized. And so that will be an important thing to help different regions to be able to reduce their waste and also to be able to attain sustainable packaging. And so generally, I think that the sustainability approach needs to be collective. We cannot do it individually. It has to be a collective approach. And as I mentioned earlier, it definitely has to be a lot of sacrifices. Sometimes, as I think Steve mentioned, that if consumers, the people are not willing to pay extra for these sustainable materials, then it really doesn't make sense. So as a consumer, we have a price to pay. As a producer, we also have a price to pay. So definitely there has to be a certain level of sacrifice. But this is the part where no one wants to hear. But generally, it's important that we consume less. We cannot attain it if we keep going like the way we are consuming. There is nothing wrong with the phone you have right now. If you think that this month you traveled and you don't need Amazon to keep sending you products, just send them an email that you don't need it. It's very simple. We definitely need to consume less. Thank you.
Hey, Jeff is not going to be happy with that statement, my brother. We don't want to be. But quite a great point there. I think, Devin, maybe you can come in here because there's quite an important interface that I believe you can bring forth to what Fereshta had mentioned about, food security, or rather food safety as critical to sustainable packaging. Because if you think about the packaging form of food, if it's able to last longer, then less food would be wasted. And I think, Fereshta, that was quite a deep point that really could bring a lot of sober-mindedness. And also just David, just also speaking about the footprint of the material. How do we go back to the basics and look at an expression of different values? I love the biscuits, but I'm telling you now, all of us, if you can change it in alcohol, we will be there. If you say alcohol is going to be packaged in glass and whatever, trust me, they're going to do it. Why? Because it will be legislated. Or if you say chocolate or whatever. So I think the legislation part is also very critical, which I would want Jaishila to extend on that. But Devin, please just come in there. How do we, as SPAR, how do you guys manage packaging with the independent stores? And also, what initiatives has the SPAR group applied to develop the waste economy? I think also just extending from what David was saying about the consumer, the plants, the value chain, maybe we can just, tie it all together for us.
Well, no problem. And I agree with everyone that's had a say previously, from Steve to everyone that's had a say. We do consume far too much as human beings, and we know that. And I guess the conversation has changed, and perhaps this may answer all the questions. Is that up until today, so let's take us dial back a few years. Packaging is, and when I say a few, let's say 10, 20 years. Packaging is ultimately it was seen as the editorial space on shelf so we can sell more stuff. So brands would use packaging as bright as, so it jumps out on the shelf. And ultimately those products are the ones that aren't necessarily designed to fit into any sort of system that it may never become waste. And if you just look at the amount of brands on shelf right now too, there's too many, man. And we just, as human beings, consume too much. And it is as it is. And I guess with the regulations coming along, which we'll talk into your question earlier, is that the regulation now is, and the the willingness of brands, and I'm talking from a South African perspective, I'm not too sure on a global perspective how that's planning out, but I guess it's quite similar because there's a massive trend globally. Because in the South African context, we sit on panels. So, for example, there's a sustainable retailer forum, which includes ourselves, Woolworths, Shoprite Checkers for a period, the Clicks Group, Pick and Pay, Food Lovers, as well as two clothing retailers in Mr. Price and the Foschini Group. And ultimately, that forum was set up 2 years ago to discuss these fundamental issues in a anti-competitive way, saying, what is the point of us all having our own view of what sustainability, also a totally overused word in the wrong context, but what message are we sending back to, number one, our suppliers? Because generally the suppliers supply the same stuff to all our stores. We just find different ways of discounting it to get people to come and buy more stuff. But how do we give leadership in that space as a retail sector, not as far with Pick and Pays? We can be creative within that space, but how do we collectively work on aligning to ensure that we can move into a space where these more economic or these more environmentally friendly pieces of packaging, for example, and there isn't one that's going to save the world, unfortunately. There's no silver bullet. You really do need to work collectively as a collaborative to find these and seek these systems, solutions and system solutions thinking. So we should all come together with the same view of adopting the Ellen MacArthur Foundation circular economic thinking and systems, and it's obviously got environmental, commercial, and a social impact. So, and that social impact is hugely important too in South African context. South Africa, we have a massive part of our population which are unemployed. We need to create jobs. We have 34% of our country that do not have access to municipal services. So us privileged people that the municipality come around and fetch our trash on a Monday morning, when the truck doesn't arrive, we sit on our groups and we say, oh, the government's so useless. What about those people that actually don't have that service, that don't have that privilege? And ultimately, we've got to think of those guys. Those guys all shop at our stores, buying similar products. And their way of getting rid of material is in the environment. Where else do you want them to put it? So we'll be very mindful of the full system again. And Joshua had mentioned earlier, but what is the systems thinking from the start to the end, the whole system involved? And the thinking is exactly that, around the circular economic thinking through the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which brought on the SA Plastics Pact. And yes, plastics is one portion of all the other materials. But from that now is led into the EPR thinking in the discussion. And the EPR, extended producer responsibility, which is now regulation which will be effective on the 5th of November, is that everyone is now in the game. And everyone is thinking the same. So what happens then is that funds will then go paid through PROs, not directly to government. Funds get paid into these PROs, which are not-for-profits, and they're material specific. So, for example, we have a plastic organization, and I'm going to dumb it down because it is a lot of detail within those. But there's plastic, paper, glass, metal, etc. And each one of these PROs are now, let's call it, their role is to facilitate better recycling, better material uses, finding out better substrate we could use as a collective. We don't just leave everything up to them to do. We are already at this stage. So when in a sparse perspective, and in our world, when we are now designing a piece of packaging, we don't just sit with our converter and say, hey, make us a bottle. We actually start talking to the waste collectors. We start saying, hey guys, what materials are you having a problem with where we can create a product out of to put into another product? What is the opportunity exist? And there may be some and there may not be. And then again, how do we design that piece of packaging so that it has the ability to fit into the system? Collection is a big, massive problem in our country, as you know. And we're saying, well, how do we, as a retailer, which is most of our stores, are 65% of them are in rural areas. In the rural areas where the opportunity exists, if I want to call it opportunity, because it is, it's opportunity to stimulate some economic growth and stimulate some economic activity, to try and give value to a piece of material that's lying in the environment or doesn't end up in the environment. So we are working tirelessly on how do we create systems within our spa world where we can bring materials back in, whether it's at the back of the store in a mini MRF type environment, whatever that may be, and then incentivize the consumer for bringing that in they can go back into the store and go buy themselves some food or airtime or some champagne if you'd like. But it's it's really to try and incentivize the consumer, because ultimately, and David mentioned earlier, education is a massive part of it. We did it last week. We've been working with, again, in our retail forum about barrier bags, single-use barrier bags, those terrible flimsy packets that our packers like to stick the bottle of Jik inside a bag. Like, those are totally single-use. So there's our retail forum is saying, how do we eliminate this? So we've all done independent trials within stores, obviously isolated trials to get consumer feedback. And the biggest problem, when I say the problem, our biggest hurdle is the consumer saying, no, we need that thing. That thing, we have to have it, goodness gracious. But we're saying, well, a year and a half ago, we never wore a mask, and now we have to wear a mask to save our lives. So we say, well, maybe we should just remove those things from store, because this is the change we have to make. But it has to be a collective, because if SPA do it on their own, you're going to go, oh, hell's teeth. It's a marketing, then it becomes a marketing thing. So if it's all of us retailers, and not call it retailer, just call it the sector. If we all have the same view and the same vision, the same strategy, and we do this together, we have a way bigger impact than just one of us doing it in isolation. And there has been a lot of work going on in the collaborative space, and then hence where we end up now. And I'll refer back to, there is no golden piece of packaging that's going to save us all. There isn't. And for example, if we need to try and reduce or replace a certain type of packaging that isn't so friendly on the environment with something that is, we can't, there's no direct swap out. We've got to think of the systems, and there are a lot of systems involved in it. Maybe rethink the way we do stuff. And I can tell you, with the way materials are getting manufactured nowadays, we're moving away from multi-layered stuff. Because 2 years ago, the only reason why we use let's go back to the Tetra example. The Tetra Pak preserves the food. It extends the shelf life. It makes it more valuable to people that don't have refrigerators. Then we can extend the shelf life. Food waste is a massive drama. We throw away, I think, I don't know how much food ends up in landfill. We do like 50%, I know, in the Western Cape at some point, in areas where there's agricultural areas. That turns into methane, etc., which is worse. And food waste in our stores, and etc. So we really got to work. There's so many facets to this. And ultimately, food security and safety is paramount. And we've got to think of ways of just doing it better. And we are very encouraged from a retail sector that there's a huge movement and a buy-in from us as well as our competitors. So now it is no longer being seen as a competitive advantage, having a certain type. And what that does is, when we can create the scale, like Steve was saying earlier, these other types of packaging are more expensive, yes, but at scale, the cost does get hugely reduced, because now the demand for that type of material becomes higher, and there's more technology. People get better at doing it, and it's a slow wheel. But I'm very, really encouraged that I know it's taken a hell of a long time, but the thinking has shifted from a retail space within food retail in South Africa, and which is hell of encouraging, because it feeds off into the rest of the industry. So the whole industry is going, okay, hang on, our old way of thinking don't work anymore, because we may not have a business in 5 years, so let's change the way we think. So I think we're going to see a massive shift in the next couple of years. I hope that's answered all your questions.
Yo, that's answered all the questions.
And I could go for days. So
I know, I can see. And it's not because there's a lot to say, it's the passion, which is what I really appreciate about the spaces that all of you are in. Jayeshla, maybe you can come in there, just consolidating everything that's been said, and then we'll have Steve, and then our last round before we close. Jayeshla?
Perfect. I hope I can, and Brent threaded quite nicely. So here's a few thoughts that have actually come to my mind that have come up from all of the panelists. And that is the fact that we can't get away from the fact that we need consumer engagement, we need education. Yes. This is critically the baseline, without a doubt. And I think the part of the issue is that we've tended to take a much more paternalistic view. Right. Don't worry, we got this. We're going to actually put in the sustainable packaging so you don't have to worry about it. And that is actually part of the problem. We're at a point where very few of our citizens, from a South African perspective, are aware that our landfills have reached capacity. Yeah. Finished, klar, that's it. Absolutely. No more. And they also are not aware that if we were to put in additional landfill sites, it would come at a significant cost to us, the tax-paying South Africans.
Yes.
And so for this, there has to be a reaction. And the reaction as part of this process is the legislature and the regulations that we see coming out now, is the action that's coming out from the industry engagement, from the plastics pacts, from all of these types of forums of different industry sectors coming together to go, oh my goodness, we got a problem.
Sure, sure.
Part of this journey could effectively be addressed if we stepped away from the paternalistic view and went for a much more inclusive approach. And this inclusive approach is everything from the consumer engagement to the way that the sectors are actually set up. And I'm specifically actually looking at it from a waste value chain perspective. Now, with the regulations that are coming up, and we've alluded to it in one way or the other, as far as the extended producer responsibility and the impact that that's going to have on packaging, there are quite a number of knock-on effects. There's effects that come into play at the municipal level, because now the municipalities have to actually engage with their householders in a totally different way. They have to actually implement some degree of separation at source. And the question is, are they ready for that? And the answer is probably yes, without realizing it, because most areas in our country are covered by the informal waste sector.
Yes.
And if we are able to approach waste collection in a much more inclusive way, we would be able to access these materials. And why is that critical? That comes down to 2 points. One is, for sure, we're trying to prevent the waste from going into landfill, because that's a critical problem by itself. The other is with regard to reuse of the resources. Where that actually comes into play is that there are quite a number of solutions or potential solutions in terms of the use of the resources that are out there. The problem is economies of scale.
Absolutely.
To be able to actually make this effective, what needs to actually happen is that we need to have enough of the material coming in. Imagine you're running a manufacturing facility. You need to know how much raw material you can actually count on so that you can plan your production processes, so that you can actually make your new product in turn. You need to come, whether it's new packaging, whether it's new final products, whatever the case may be, you need to know what you're dealing with. And this topic extends beyond packaging per se to quite a number of the other resources that we're utilizing. So this is the critical role that legislature can play in this particular space, is that we need a key enabler. We try to do this for some time by ourselves. We've had producer responsibility organizations, PRO, for quite some time in South Africa on a voluntary basis. And it was making some traction, particularly in the plastic space. But we need to ramp it up. We need to ramp it up in a quite a significant way, because it has made a dent, but not enough. And we need to make a wider dent in terms of the use of these resources. This is the key point that comes down to the education and the consumer engagement. You know, I'm going to give my age away over here. But when I was growing up, we had this whole thing about zap it in a ZB, right? We understood that you couldn't just throw your thing somewhere. It had to actually go somewhere. There was no away. There were consequences for actions. And that is the type of engagement that we are needing. And we're needing that on all levels. The point that I wanted to actually make is that when we talk about a holistic system, we truly are talking about a holistic system. It means that we have to engage with our consumers to be able to say, listen, I think you need to know we have a problem. And we would like you to be part of the solution. This is what we're thinking, but we'd also like to get your input on how can it be better. And in the meantime, our responsibility is we need to actually look back into the industry side of things. We need to actually look into our manufacturing processes. How can we reduce the amount of resources that we're consuming within our manufacturing process itself as a starting point? Then we need to actually look at the use of the actual raw materials itself. Where is it coming from? I was part of a forum discussion yesterday, which I thought a very interesting fact was mentioned. We have been nicely collecting our plastic packaging for recycling purposes over the years in South Africa. We have suddenly reached a plateau where we are not increasing the consumption of that recycled material. Because this is part of the problem, is recycling is not an end to itself. It's not a magical land where it suddenly disappears. We need to have the next step planned out. How are we going to utilize these resources? Where is it actually going to? How do we actually plan for the next use and the next cycle in itself?
That's right.
So therefore, if recycling is part of the answer, it's not the answer, but if it's part of the answer, then we need a clear plan in terms of how can we increase the amount of consumption of recycled components in what it is that we're manufacturing.
Cool.
And in this particular context, it is that legislature can play a role, because now we are having to have a concerted effort in terms of collecting the material itself. And with that, there can actually be a concerted effort in terms of investment that's needed for recycling and collection, for recycling, for reuse, so that these things can actually put the economics of waste into motion.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jayesh. I think those are very critical points there. Stephen, maybe you can come in. We've got 7 minutes left. So within that 7 minutes, I just want to read some of the comments in the live chat so that each of you can be afforded the opportunity to then just add, and then we'll have our closing remarks. So yeah, Steve, you mentioned a point earlier. You want to extend on that?
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on Josela's point there about economics and actually speaks to the whole problem. So I just wanted to just talk a bit about the economics of waste and to understand the problem, because economics has created the problem. The economics of consumerism has created the problem, and it's not going to be solved by the plastics pact, and it's not going to be solved by education, it's not going to be solved by the work we're doing, it's not going to be solved by any one mechanism, because if the economics are against it, it's like a leaking bucket. So the economics of waste are such that the cost of the waste, the cost of the packaging, let's call it, becomes waste, is not factored in. The total life cycle cost of the waste is not factored into the purchase price. And that starts from the production from polymers out of oils as a byproduct of the petroleum industry. You know, the cost is subsidized. It's a free byproduct. But it comes through to the packaging and to the products in a way that the cost of collecting it is not factored in. So we look at just the cost of buying the packaging, not the cost of buying it and then collecting it afterwards. So if you had to add that cost on, we have to equalize that cost and say that everything you bought at SPAR has to go back to SPAR. Everything you buy at Checkers has to go back to Checkers. Then if SPAR doesn't collect it and Checkers doesn't collect it, they have to pay a penalty. Suddenly they're going to push back to the suppliers. So you better make sure you give us packaging that we can collect and process. And if the producer is not going to be able to produce packaging that can fulfill that obligation, they're going to find another producer. So at some point, the economics have to be changed. And we're hoping regulation is going to do that. But at this stage, it seems like it's a drop in the ocean. We see the economics of waste. We talk about the informal economy, collective economy. Let me tell you for a fact that a collector cannot earn minimum wage. It's impossible. It's not feasible. And so what we're saying is that we're okay with people earning under minimum wage, because yes, it's better than nothing. But the economics of waste is that it's cheaper to produce something from raw material, from virgin plastic, than it is to produce something from recycled material. So there has to be, someone has to pay a premium to make it out of recycled, or to be forced to make it out of recycled material. So I think the key thing is, how do we change the economics? Well, we can't change the economics, but how do we use economics to solve the problem? How do we pass on that cost to the consumer so that now the consumer actually has a vested interest in waste? So if you make it their problem, and they make it the retailer's problem, make it the producer's problem, and we all have to pay something towards fixing this problem, we can then come up with a solution. And I think what's important is that people like us on this panel, who actually experts, need to be starting to just remind people that it's a collective problem, and we need to get on board, and we need to sacrifice, as David was saying, and we need to be able to leverage the economics of the situation, and not just be okay with, oh, well, let's just come up with a new fancy product or a new like short-term solution. So I think I would like us to try and pull together to say, yes, this is something we actually need to work together on. What do we calculate the actual cost of waste is And how do we then split that cost up over the value chain?
Absolutely. And I think consumers end up not buying into legislation and, following all these new rules and new startups and so forth that we initiate through sustainable packaging, because they feel like guinea pigs. Everything is just thrown at them, but they're never involved in the process. So I think you've mentioned quite a critical point there. Stephen, I just saw some eyes, like a meme on the screen. I don't know if it's our screen or yours, but it was quite interesting.
Yeah, that's my sunglass glasses.
I know, Stephen, you are so theatrical. I think more theatrical than me, But anyway, good point that you mentioned there. We're running out of time, so I just want to read the comments here. So, of course, you have the participants saying morning to everyone. They're quite excited that you guys are our panelists this morning. And they're excited that TETRA PAK has sponsored. So we are saying TETRA PAK, come back again next year and be our lead sponsor for our panel discussions. It's just a joke. But okay, so we have Karen saying here, biodegradable single-use packets that only decompose at 40 to 60 degrees is a problem environmentally. I think, David, you mentioned that about just going back to the footprint of the material. I think that's also Karen agreeing to those sentiments. And then you also have Margaret saying, interesting session. Agree, we need to work collectively. Social impact is huge, and appreciate where retailers have an occasion agreed not to use reverse logistics, but to allow locals to sell to buyback centers, so to make a living. I guess also speaking about the value chain that we were talking about, to say, how can it go to the consumer, go back to the producer, and how can it, sort of not really recycle itself, but some kind of model that is workable for all parties involved. We have Lynette saying the big retail shops could consider putting up rubbish collection points in these areas where there are no refuse collection, so people can get rid of rubbish there. They will have to remove this as well then. Once again, speaking to Devon's point, but there is a sense of it being unfair. There is a sense of social polarization with that statement. It still says there are those who can afford those services, there are those who can't. And I think it also speaks to the point of infrastructure, sustainable infrastructure, because we then have a lot of informal settlements where people just, obviously dump the rubbish, and it creates landfills. It's also an issue of hygiene. So once again, going back to Devon's point, is how can we make them involved? How can we make it better for all parties? And then we have Karen saying, could not agree more, Devon. Great comments. Collaboration across us retailers is important. I see that, Devon, somebody wants to give you a bells. So it looks like you're quite popular this morning. The comments are well received. We have Lawrence saying, oil is a major problem to get rid of, as 1 liter oil contaminates 1 million liters of fresh water. Collection agencies don't want mixed oils. I guess that's also a concern from Lawrence. Also adding there, Scandinavia has reduced their food waste by a significant margin. So that would be an incredible case study to research. We have Samantha saying, great suggestion, Lynette, but would people do it? Research says that people won't walk more than 20 steps to put anything in a bin. Yeah, no, that's quite a reality. Research says that people won't walk more than 20 steps to put anything in a bin. Sure. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that. We have Karen saying EPR is going to force the need to communicate with the consumer and educate them. Ultimately, the consumer will be paying that EPR fee. I guess it's also leading to our next panel discussion around EPR. So that would be a nice comment to add there, but also to accentuate in this regard. We have Samantha saying, I'm cynic. Consumers pay a plastic bag levy, but they still line the streets, drains, and felt. Quite a good point there, Samantha. Bring back Zibi. We don't know what Zibi is, but thank you so much. Well, apparently I'm too young for Zibi. Okay, Samantha, we'll have to, those that know will tell us what Zibi is so we can do it. This is an engaging dialogue, very informative, highlighting that we have to take greater measures in managing waste and recycling. I think different industries need to talk with the use of recycled materials. There's plenty of space where this material can be used, but the industry still use traditional products. Great point there, Paulo. We have Darren saying consumers need to see that they have some skin in the game in order to change their behavior. Quite critical point, speaks to being accountable and taking ownership in that regard. So I then request our panelists to please give their closing remarks. We're out of time. Maybe in some of the comments that have been added, you can just add one or two sentiments. Maybe let me start with Farishta from TETRA PAK. Please, can you give us your closing remarks? And then we'll have Devin, we'll have Stephen, David, and Jayashala.
Well, thank you so much, and especially for those great questions. And to answer some of them is that, well, we have a clear strategy towards to address all those concerns. And the main strategy that we have is to have the sustainable opening, to have paper straw, tethered cap, etc. And then, having said that before, to have a more renewable package, full renewable package, and then to use recycled content. We just started using recycled polymer in our packaging, and then we are trying and testing to use recycled fiber in our packaging, but without compromising on food safety. That's the first important thing for us. And of course, one of the most important thing for us is to enable recycling by design and address anti-littering.
Thank you so much for that. That is Farishta Asemi, Sustainability Transformation Manager at TETRA PAK, Greater Middle East and Africa. Thank you there. Can we have Devin?
Yes, thanks again, all panelists and everyone for putting this together, and TETRA for the sponsorship. I think it's outstanding. And again, we speak of collaborative thinking, and I guess if we can all collectively create inclusive systems where everyone's included in the whole value chain, and ultimately fits into our purpose as part of our group, is to inspire people to do and be more. And ultimately, if we can include everyone that we go along with on this journey, it's ultimately where we want to be. So thank you very much, and the discussion has been fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Devin. That was Mr. Galtree, Group Packaging Manager at the SPAR Group South Africa. We are definitely going to be beneficiaries and of SPAR, and we're going to be actively involved in SPAR strategy. So as we buy, we know that Devin is behind the ethical packaging of this. So we're going to be encouraging that. Thank you so much there, Mr. Galtree. Can we have Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, Abang. Thanks, everybody. I think it'd be great to continue to chat with you guys and see where we can collaborate, and possibly open up the conversation to the broader public as well. Our focus is in social upliftment. So we're looking at how do we develop businesses, how do we develop people who are unemployed to be part of the solution. But as I said, one of our major problems is economics at play. So I'm sure many of you guys have got R&D budgets and you've got a lot of backing. So I think small organizations like us that are doing the kind of hard work on the ground would really appreciate to work with some of you. And yeah, we all need to figure out how to solve this problem. So I think great to collaborate and to meet you all, and hopefully we can continue the conversation.
Thank you so much. That was the founder of the Makerspace, Stephen Gray. Appreciate your contributions there. David.
Hi, I'm really excited about the conversations we've had here today, and I think really great insights and thoughts have been shared here, and I think they are very practical for implementation. To conclude, I think that in everything that we do, we should just try and reduce the waste, because nothing can become waste until it's actually wasted. And human behavior is really funny, because we see this trend in all the conversations that we're having. People travel all the way from one country to another just to go and litter the beach. It's very interesting, but as producers and as people in the industry, let's give the consumers a reason to actually walk and go and put the thing in the bin, or let's add value to the packaging so that they can have a reason to use it for something monetary or anything. And we cannot do, I repeat it again, anything without educating the people. We can always find a way to educate the people. Who knew that we could just eat ice cream, finish the cream, and just eat the package as well? Who thought that could be possible? So it's possible for us to come up with ideas. If we are investing into R&D, let's do it and do it well. Because if we can plant trees with drones and we can plant so many things with drones, in the 21st century, we can do better. Thank you.
Yo, David, you are a think tank of your generation, and I really look forward to reading your books, listening to the podcast. Please do post it. You have so much knowledge, just like everybody else. I really believe that this group has got a lot to offer, and conversations must continue after this so that they can, formulate tangible results. And just the issue of value, I think that is something that is going to drive our next panel discussion on EPR. So if you can, do stay tuned. But thank you so much for your contributions. They're truly, truly amazing. Thank you. Last but not least, Jayeshla.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say a quick thank you. I've really enjoyed this panel, the discussion, the dialogue, and of course to TETRA PAK for sponsoring for this to take place in the first place. There are certain key things that are my takeaways that I think we need to have going forward. We need to keep the dialogue going. The more that we discuss this, the more that we engage, the more that we can build more tangible outcomes. We definitely need a collaborative approach. One person is not going to solve everything by themselves. And this is a journey. And this is really the critical point. It's a journey. We all have to start somewhere and we have to keep going. As David mentioned, there is no silver bullet. So we need to actually be at a point where we realize it's going to take the effort and it's going to actually require all of us to pull together. I just wanted to very quickly end off with my definition of sustainability. It actually comes from the immigrant mantra that when you come to a new place, you come there to create a better life for you, but not just for you, but for generations to come. And that is my view of sustainability. Thank you very much.
Wow. Jayeshla, what a way to end off the session. I'm not going to add, I'm not going to take away. You have basically just summed up everything for us. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to engaging more with Toma to see what are the initiatives that you guys do and how we can be involved. To all of you, thank you incredibly for your time. TETRA PAK, we thank you for availing this platform for us to engage. Like Jayeshla has just said, that the conversations and the dialogues must go on. Also, as Stephen and Devin have mentioned, the importance of collaboration. Let us do that. Let it not end here. Let us move forward, because the world needs all of you as experts in your industry. And I believe that, the sectors that you're in, the companies that you're in, could provide a blueprint for our government to lead us better, for other corporations to lead us better in understanding what sustainable packaging means. So thank you all for your time, and we look forward to engaging further. All of the very best.